This is the PowerPoint for Foundations of Literacy Week 11. During this PowerPoint, you will have highlights regarding literacy instruction, reading strategies, particularly literature circles, and there'll be some introductory information with regard to our secondary text that will begin this week, Other People's Words. Our objectives for this week are as follows. Students will be able to construct a diagram that draws connections and shows relationship between the elements of our study thus far in the semester. The goal is for you to see that the things that we have been talking about are not aspects of literacy in isolation, but rather they show, what we hope to do is show the connections between each of the different things that we've focused on. And this will be specifically important as you consider your literacy history assignment and connecting your personal literacy history and that of the interviewee that you've selected to what we've been studying. Students will also be able to explain what literacy is in the 21st century literacy context, and also articulate what a literacy-rich classroom looks like, including the curricular focus, classroom environment, and culturally responsive and differentiated pedagogy. In other words, what we're going to do is revisit our original definition at the beginning of the semester with regard to what we perceive literacy is in the here and now in the 21st century, and then how that affects these different aspects that are demonstrated or shown here in this third objective. And then the last one is you should be able to assess the educational experience and cultural context of Jenny and Donnie, the two main characters in focus in Other People's Words. Last week, we participated in somewhat a simulation of dyslexia. Within the PowerPoint, we talked about, or we highlighted a few signs and symptoms and some of the accommodations that we can make in our classroom. So this semester, this is a listing of the different things, if you think about it, that we have highlighted to date. We talked about symbolic thought and the fact that what we read and how we communicate is putting symbol to our thoughts and then translating it, so to speak, into our understanding, which happens through the written word. I believe with Dr. Cahus, you had a brief history of literacy and its role in the U.S. My first week, we sort of touched on again the Ohio Learning Standards and saw how important those were with the formulation of our lessons that we will be presenting our students. We talked about the foundation of literacy in the function of a story, and we talked about this particularly as it pertained to Frindle, and then also as we talked a little bit about folklore. We talked about the nature of instruction and our need to focus on comprehension and vocabulary, and we touched on those things as we talked about boys and literacy and a couple of other things. We really highlighted well the idea of motivation to read and what that means for our students and how we can motivate them. We talked a little bit about the type and genre of different types of texts, and that was connected to motivation to read when we thought about the idea of students having the choice to read what they would like. We just touched briefly on impacts of literacy acquisition, things like gender, culture, linguistic differences, and some of those were embedded in discussion like of our English language learners and that type of thing. We spent some class time talking about culturally responsive pedagogy, what it means to be culturally responsive in the way we deliver our instruction, in the environment within our classrooms, those types of things. We also talked about English language learners. You did a web quest prior to and then over the course of spring break, and in which we highlighted what English language learners are, or who they are, I should say, and what's unique to their learning experience. And then last week we did a little bit of investigation into what dyslexia is, and I recognize that this is not the only learning concern or obstacle that students may have to face to their reading development, but it is one of them. And so we sort of hone in on that to sort of give you an idea of what types of things you may have to accommodate for in the classroom as you think about the specific needs of your students. The previous slide listed all the different things that we've looked at or talked about or touched upon so far in the semester. And there was an indication that these were connected. And I didn't highlight that, but I want you to be thinking about that with regard to your moving ahead and the additional things that we're going to add to our toolbox, so to speak, as we complete the semester. The definition that's here is one, if you remember, one of my first weeks with you, I had taken what you had put on Post-its as a result of your group discussion, and I sort of put them all together into one somewhat succinct definition as you as a class formed it for literacy. You suggested that literacy is the understanding of how to interpret, create, and communicate through reading and writing, but it's not just limited to reading and writing. It is an agent to develop thoughts, which when used develop our ability to communicate. So that goes back to that whole idea of symbolic thought. We take what's in our minds and then we develop a way to communicate. There are multiple meanings and multiple forms or types of literacy. It's dynamic, meaning it constantly changes. It helps develop our perceptions and our understanding of the world around us and allows individuals to be functioning members of society. It is considered a human right, but sadly not all have access to it. So as you think about that, has our definition of literacy changed as we progress through the week? Should it change? And what would you add or remove, if anything? Remember that literacy is more than reading and writing. It does include reading, writing, speaking, and listening, and a form of visual representation. It can happen in a variety of contexts. We can use multimodal presentations of what might be considered text. It happens within a social and collaborative construct. It's a situation, hopefully, where all learners have access. Literacy can be scaffolded by helpful strategies, teacher support, and modeling. And literacy happens with real-life application. So if you look at the diagram there, you're going to hear the name Vygotsky a lot throughout your education classes, but he sort of incorporates all of these things into what was just noted here on the page. So literacy acquisition in the classroom is promoted in part by the activities, strategies, instruction that we provide, all of these things that we use within our lesson designs. And as teachers of reading and content in area instructors who support further development or proficiency in intermediate and disciplinary literacy development, what should we focus on? So think about that for a second. If we're teaching reading, or if we're a math teacher or a social studies or science teacher, English language arts teacher, that is just going to continue to support the literacy development and proficiency of our students, what should we focus on in our classroom? And there are a number of things. Comprehension, most definitely. Problem solving, communication skills, critical thinking, visual representations, and vocabulary. And none of this should be new in your thinking because we've been talking about it over the period of the semester. So how do we support literacy acquisition? One of the key things that we can use as a tool or as a strategy, and it's not something that you'll implement every day, but one of the tools that we can use is something called a literature circle. And my hope is that you've each had opportunity to participate in this. It can be, a literature circle can be formatted in a number of different ways. We're going to utilize one of those ways where each of you will have a particular role within your group, and you'll do some research or some type of preparation that you will share with the group. And the idea is that you get a very comprehensive perspective of a particular text that you're looking at together, but you're attacking it or approaching it from different mindsets, I guess, and then you're going to share that together. So one of the best literacy strategies used to foster the love of reading and ensure that they become lifelong readers is the use of literature circles. There's a lot of research that suggests that when this is used in the classroom, it is a promotion for the students to be more involved with reading. It centers around a small group discussion, and it is entirely student-led. The teacher, if she participates at all, is just as a coach or that guide on the side. And it's sort of the same type of idea as a book club. So, more about them. A literature circle is something that all students can get involved in. I have assigned you a particular role for our experience, but a lot of times what you'll do is let students choose themselves which role they would like to take on. One of the roles has to do with summarizing things. Some students are better at that than others. There's one that has a visual representation of a concept or the story or whatever it is that you're discussing, and some students would be hesitant to take on that role if they don't feel that they're a very good artist or that type of thing. So it does suit all types of learners and learners of various levels. It allows for good discussion. The sky's the limit with regard to the genre. We are going to use an informational text. It actually is a narrative story with regard to other people's words of Jenny and her son Donnie and their journey towards learning how to read. But this can be used for poems, for chapter books, for biographies, for stories. The sky's the limit with regard to the types of text that can be used. Excuse me, it actually can be used with some adaptation in our content classes. You could use this format in a science class, a biology class. If you're having students read a particular chapter or a couple of different articles, you would obviously reframe the roles a little bit, but the concept of the literacy circle would be beneficial for their discussion. It can be flexible with regard to the amount of time that you spend. You can spend a day or several days or a couple of weeks. If you're doing the study of a Shakespearean play, you may want to implement the use of the literature circle to discuss each act or sections of each act, that type of thing. And it is entirely, the intent is entirely student-centered. So the role of the teacher is only guidance and coaching. It's a great opportunity for you as an educator to participate in formative assessment as you interact with, or should I say more observe, your students interacting with each other. It fosters deep level discussions, and I'm not going to read all this, but what exactly should be happening? There's going to be all kinds of, depending on the roles that you implement, there's going to be summarizing and making connections and vocabulary and all those types of things incorporated. And I'll give you opportunity here to read through the specifics, but I won't read each of these books. Same thing here. There are benefits as well. If you're mixing your students up to where you have strong readers and less proficient readers together, it gives them opportunity to interact with each other and support each other. It allows students to be exposed to a variety of books, to develop some responsibilities, to learn about themselves as readers. So there's lots of different benefits from this particular strategy or technique. So these are the ones we're going to be using, and you'll notice that in yellow there is a link, And if you like this idea, if you follow the link, there are printables there that you can use for your classroom. But these are the different roles that we're going to be using. The passage picker, the word wizard, the artful artist, the summarizer, and the connector. We won't be using the discussion director because unfortunately we're doing this online. And so normally though, there is somebody who sort of functions as the leader of the group, and he or she is responsible for being aware of all of the different aspects and sort of directing the discussion together. So we will this week be using the literature circle for our discussion of chapters 1 and 2 of Other People's Words. And you will notice if you go to our Blackboard that there is a discussion already set up for you. You've been assigned a group and a role. And what I'd like you to do is, over the course of the week, go ahead and read the first 2 chapters. If you do not have a book, I have scanned and uploaded the first 2 chapters. If you look on the left-hand side of our Blackboard, you're going to notice a tab that's labeled Other People's Words, and when you click in there, you'll see the first 2 chapters, and so you'll have access to them if you don't actually have a text. But read the first 2 chapters and think about those chapters as you read in the mindset of the role that you will play in the literature circle. So make sure you go to the discussion board first and discover what you're going to be doing so that as you read, you can find the different pieces and parts that you'll need to participate in the discussion. So find your group, figure out what see what your distinction is for the role, read the 2 chapters. Then go back to the group post and you will post your name. So mine would be Lena and I am the artful artist. And so I'll follow the requirements that are for me with my thread just in my group. Each of us are going to do that and upload our piece by Friday evening at midnight. And then over the course of the weekend, comment on the posts of just those in your particular group. So we're not going to do it intergroup this time. You're just going to do it within your group. But comment on each of the others' posts. Again, avoid comments like, oh, good job, but comment a little bit more specifically on what it is that they've shared. If you're commenting on mine as the artful artist, perhaps I've prepared a visual aid that sort of summarizes or sort of encapsulates a key concept or maybe a couple of key concepts, and you thought of another one or an additional way that that could have been done, maybe that would be beneficial to somebody who's unfamiliar with the story or that type of thing. But leave a couple of sentences for each post of your group mates. Okay, after you've done that, or even before, you may want to go ahead and complete this. The remainder of the slides will help us develop a sort of understanding, a background of the area known as Appalachia, the region that Jenny and Donnie come from, and those things that are the norm in this area. You'll notice as you flip through here that there are a number of photos. There is a slide that contains, I think it has to do with Appalachian language. Please take the time to click on the link and listen to how they speak. Not only how they speak, because they do have a very distinct accent for this region, but also the types of phrases and words that they use will be unique. Unless you've been exposed to this area before, some of what they're saying you probably will not understand until they explain it. So it's a really beneficial walk through with regard to these slides, because it really will give you a mindset so that as you go back to the text and you further read about Jenny and Donnie and their experience with acquiring literacy, it'll make more sense to you. So take some time and flip through the remainder of this. Keep your volume up, because as you get towards the end, I will have some additional comments. This is the slide that I was referring to with regard to the way that they speak. Take a few minutes to click on the link and listen as they explain different things that are unique to their language and their interaction as people in the Appalachians. This is an important slide for you to keep in mind, as it sort of puts in a succinct form those assignments that are coming up and what you need to be thinking about as you think ahead. For next week, we'll be looking at chapters 3, 4, and 5 of Other People's Words. Each of the chapters is a little bit longer than some of what I've had you read so far this semester. So you will each only be responsible for reading one of the chapters. I will, in the next couple of days, prepare a listing of the groups that you'll be in and which of the 3 chapters you'll be assigned to. And then next week, we'll be doing an assignment together through a Google Doc that will be embedded in our Blackboard for you to share the things that you learned in each of your chapters so that you can see that from the perspective of the 3 different chapters. For this week, don't forget that you need to upload your discussion thread within your group by Friday, and then your comments to each other by next Monday. You should have already uploaded your literacy history part 1 to me, and I will, within the next couple of days, be reading through those and providing some feedback to you. So when you see that that it's been completed, make sure you open it up and check on the comments, because that will help you with your rewrite. Sunday, April 12th is when part 2 is due, so you need to be making some contact with your interviewee. Something that might be beneficial to you is if you are doing a form of a video call, see if maybe you can record it, or an audio call, record it so that you have access to the answers to your questions to write your narrative. Of course, you can obviously take notes, but if you have a recording, that may be beneficial. Make sure that you ask them for their permission to record prior to doing so. And then, so that's when your interviewee history is due. You will not have opportunity yet to get feedback from me on that as of class on the 14th. You're just going to put both of your pieces and parts together and you'll be doing a peer review over the next week, but we'll talk about that more as we get there. Please be reading your book for the Let Me Tell You About the Book I've Been Reading and thinking about a creative artifact. I will provide you more information of when things are due and how we're going to do that. I would love to have some type of a virtual environment where we do small groups and you present just in front of 3 or 4 of your peers. We may end up doing videos, instead. So I will keep you aware of that. If you have any questions as you're working through any of the assignments for this week or ongoing, please let me know. I am checking my email regularly. So stay well, stay healthy, be safe as you're out and about. And I know that we're mostly a stay-at-home, under a stay-at-home order, of course. So just be safe as you go to the grocery store and take care of other necessary responsibilities. And I know some of you are working, so be very careful as you're interacting with others. Best wishes. Please keep in touch with me if you have any questions.